Hey guys, so welcome to day 16 of the class. Uh, we're almost at the end. We're coming right up now. So that's a great point, and it's a great spot to be in. You guys have done awesome learning how to run your own business. So today is a tough topic. How do you deal with discipline and firing? The legalities on this are simple and they're not. And I'll explain what I mean by that. From a legal standpoint, Pennsylvania is an at-will state. So everything we're going to talk about assumes that you do not have a labor union in your facility. That's our starting point. Now, what else does that mean, or where else do we go from there? Well, Pennsylvania is an at-will state. So same with New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, New York. So when I say that it is an at-will state, theoretically, from a legal standpoint, a manager or an owner can go in and fire somebody for almost any reason and does not have to give an explanation, nor do they have to provide any type of notice. Now, that being said, that's the legalities of this. That's not the full picture. And what do I mean by that? Well, remember what we talked about when we talked about hiring somebody. Before that person ever walks in the door, you are out upwards $10,000 plus. You've made a huge investment. You don't want to throw that investment away the first time something doesn't go right. What you want to attempt is to fix that investment. And the reason why is because if you need somebody working in that bay or working on that desk, okay? So you've hired somebody to do a specific job. So you need that job done. Now you're going to fire that person because they didn't get the job done. You're going to have to go back out and hire somebody else to do that same job. Okay? This isn't easy. You're going to put out another $10,000 plus to bring somebody in and fill that spot. So it's always less costly to attempt to fix a performance issue than it is to simply fire someone and try to bring somebody else in. Now, there are some things that are going to cause somebody to be fired immediately because having them is going to cost you more money. Gross negligence. They didn't tighten any wheel lugs. And it's not a one-time thing. This has happened more than once. You've tried to train them, teach them, improve their performance, and they refuse to get better. Gross negligence. That's going to end up in lawsuits. Theft that you can prove. They are taking money, resources, parts from your shop without your permission. Think about this. They lie on submitting the hours they worked. Or they say they worked a full 8 hours, but they took a 2-hour lunch. And they didn't report that if they were an hourly employee. If they're flat rate, they're claiming more hours on a job than what it really pays. And they have no good, real, valid reason to try to argue for more hours. And I'll explain that in a minute. But bottom line, if they're knowingly doing this, that's theft. They're attempting to steal money in their paycheck away from the shop. So, gross negligence, theft, if they willfully attempt to hurt a customer or another employee or cause damage, willfully, not mean it. When I say willfully, I mean it's not an accident. They didn't do something wrong. They didn't make a mistake. This is, they purposely attempted to destroy a lift. They purposely damaged a customer car. And there could be a whole slew of reasons why. Okay, so when we're talking about things like this, no, those are things that having that person work for you, and you know they conducted this illegal, immoral, or unethical activity, could potentially open you up to being liable. Or let me clarify that, liable for what they've done. Not so much that you did it, but by you being silent and not having some type of repercussion that you agree with it. It's not a good spot to be in legally. So no, you're not going to tolerate that. Plus, beyond the risk factor, they might be taking money right out of your pocket, so you're not going to tolerate those things. Nobody would. Now, there are a lot of things that are mistakes, that are what we would call a performance issue. Okay? Somebody keeps getting here at 7:30 and you schedule them to work at 7:30, they're not starting on cars until 7:45. So they're routinely causing you a problem with customers. You've let them know about it. You're not going to fire them the first one, maybe even two times it happens. You're going to have a conversation. You're going to sit down and talk. Normally speaking, there's going to be 3 steps. And there might be multiple incidents of each step. But you're going to have a verbal warning, you're going to have a written warning, and then you'll proceed to firing. Now, there might be some things between a written warning and a firing. Suspension, a temporary demotion. There might be other consequences in there. Okay, but basically a verbal, a written, and then a dismissal. So the first time somebody doesn't meet your expectations, you're going to pull them aside and you're going to talk with them. Now, this is where good managers and really, really successful owners and okay managers and alright owners are separated. Your really, really good manager and good owner are going to have not a quick, hey, don't do this again, tisk tisk. That's going to be your okay, so-so leader. A boss, not a leader. Somebody who's going to be a leader and build that morale and build that employee experience, they're going to have a little bit of a more in-depth conversation. They're going to want to find out, why is this going on? Is there some obstacle that the employee cannot overcome? Childcare, commute, and find out if it's an obstacle they can help fix. Your role as the leader, whether it be the manager or the owner, is to take obstacles out of people's way so they could do their job to the best that they could do it. Now, you've had a verbal warning. So you're going to continue making progress. Now, if the employee gets better, for a period of time and then you see it happen again, you might go back and have another conversation and just check in, make sure everything's good, that type of deal. But let's say you talk about it, it gets better for a day or two, and then we go right back to the old story. Now you're going to pull the employee in, and you might have, like I said, another conversation, or you might have a write-up there that say, look, I need this to get fixed. I thought we had it fixed. We talked about this solution. We talked about this solution. You said you had it under control. I'm putting a written warning down because I need you to understand this is a big problem. And here's how your being late is affecting the whole shop. Hopefully, again, the employee fixes it. Maybe they fix it for a long time, then all of a sudden something happens. Again, you might go right back to the beginning and start with a verbal. Most places that have these written down in a handbook, and that's what most companies will have, they'll have a handbook for an employee that spells out step by step how discipline goes. And they do that for covering their own behind. They don't want an employee to take them to court and say, you fired me because I'm this religion, or I'm this race, or I'm this gender, or believe it or not, a big one, I'm too old. They didn't think I could do the job. I've heard that a lot. Or I'm too young. They wouldn't promote me. They fired me instead of promoting me because I was too young. I've heard that too. So companies will usually write down their procedure for discipline so that they don't get in trouble later. But maybe you pull, most companies that have a written policy, a write-up is good for a year. If the employee fixes everything for a year, usually they're right back at the beginning. We're kind of starting over again. But let's say you handed the employee a write-up and everything got better for a week or two. And now again, you're seeing them come in at 7:30, 7:40, and they're supposed to be working on a car starting at 7:30. Now you've done multiple attempts to fix this. By the time you're at the point of having a termination, where you're telling an employee, we're letting you go, it's not a discussion at that meeting. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that happens out there. That, a lot of times when an employee is being fired, they will start saying, well, I could have done this better. Give me a better chance. Give me this. Part of the reality of being a manager, and I'm not going to lie to you, it is the toughest conversation I've ever had with an employee, is when I have to tell them, you're fired. Now, sometimes it's been because they were not a good fit. They were negative. They had a bad attitude. They were killing the morale that I needed my school or my business or my shop to have. And so they were not a fit, and I had to let them go. Sometimes I've had ones where the employee tried their hardest, but they couldn't get childcare worked out, which meant they couldn't be there when I needed them there every morning. And I didn't have a spot to move them around in. It wasn't you're fired because you're bad. It was you're fired because what you're able to do doesn't meet what I need. And I've had employees that I've had to fire because, quite frankly, they could not get the job done. Those last two are probably the toughest incidents. But when you're at the point sitting across from somebody and you have to tell them they're fired, you have to keep it factual, not emotional. And that's hard because you're telling somebody that their livelihood, how they take care of their family, it can't be with you anymore. You just took what they kind of, I don't want to say took for granted, but what they expected, what they banked on to take care of their needs, you're taking that away. So you have to be factual. Here's my reason why. We need you to leave the premises. We need you, usually when you're firing a tech, you're not going to tell them, hey, we need you to leave the premises right this second. What you're probably going to tell them is, we need you to leave. When you can make arrangements to pick up your toolbox, give me a call. It'll be either before the shop opens or after the shop closes one day. We'll make sure the bay is open. That way you can have the tow truck, because most techs with a bigger box will use a tow truck, or they'll get a friend with a trailer to take their rolling toolbox away. But you're going to want that at a time where you don't have the entire shop crowded, especially when you don't want to have customers there. Customers there gives them a place to put on a show, gives them a place to get people worked up, gives them a place to distract from whatever the real problem is. And quite honestly, they may just want to lash out and be angry, and that's understandable. Even if they did everything wrong, they're going to want to lash out. Now, you fired somebody. You have some responsibilities as an employer, okay? Things like health benefits. There's going to be a timeline from when you fire them to when they end. They usually don't end the day you're fired, okay? Usually takes a payroll cycle, a week to 2 weeks for them to end. Now, a lot of people will then go and submit a claim to the unemployment insurance. We talked about that last week when we talked about pay stubs. Unemployment insurance, they're going to ask them, were you fired for cause? And most employees are going to say, no, I was not. Or they're going to make a claim that you fired them, I wouldn't say illegally, but incorrectly. That they shouldn't have been fired. And then usually you'll get a letter from unemployment insurance that says, well, can you verify when they worked for you, what did they do for you, when were they fired, and why were they fired? And this can go back and forth for a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on what state and what county you're in, for the court to determine whether or not they ought to get paid unemployment insurance or not. Obviously, the claim affects you as a business because that's money you've been putting aside that now, the government's going to look at, and they do keep track of how many claims come against you and things like that. If you fired a person for cause, you have the right to defend yourself and say, no, they don't deserve unemployment insurance. I shouldn't have to pay more into this because of them. They got fired for cause. But again, you have to prove that. The same as if they're going to say you fired them for an incorrect reason. Now, there are illegal reasons. You cannot fire them for one of the protected classes. What's a protected class? Age, race, ethnicity, creed, gender, sexual orientation, and you cannot fire them simply because they had a disability. Now, if that disability prevented them from completing the duties that go with the job they were supposed to be doing, then yes, you can choose to not hire somebody, or you can choose to let somebody go because they're unable to complete the duties of the job. But you can't not hire them or fire them because of the disability. And I know you might be thinking, well, why does that matter? Because if you were to say, I'm firing you because you use a walker, that's illegal. But if you say to somebody, look, I have to let you go, and the reason why is because you're not able to move around the shop at a speed that's safe. I'm worried about something hitting you. I'm worried about something falling on you. You can't get out of the way quickly enough to maintain safe distance from working items. That's a duty of the job. Or you can't lift 50 pounds, and that's in the job description. So one of the things we're going to talk about in this week is we're going to talk about paperwork and managing a shop. And part of the paperwork that we're going to talk about is a job description, and that's why it's so important, because that's going to lay out the tasks or the parts of the job. So this was all about firing. I hope you guys have a little bit of a better sense. We're going to talk about this on Monday, or actually our next class day. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.